Not yet. We'll have our avatars will run the meeting.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks, Lindsay. Welcome, everyone. Today, May 14th, this is a meeting, special meeting of the Homeless and Housing Subcommittee. And calling the order, or just call it to order. Okay. Now turn it over to.
I'm gonna,
Susanna
the
Kelly.
first topic is an update on our regular evaluation of the camping ordinance and some enforcement plans that we wanted to run by you before we execute on them. So I'm gonna let Daniel cover that part.
Hi. All right, so we have sort of 4 hotspots right now within the city. Obviously, we have Anderson Drive, which right now has 14 people staying there as of Monday. We have here, or the city property at the marsh right by Home Depot, Canalways, which has between 4 to 8 people, but had been much higher in the recent weeks in terms of total population. And then we have here at City Hall where we have at least 7 people who are staying here regularly. And then we have someone in the Bret Harte Hills who has a very large encampment in a very wooded area that is going to be a challenge to remedy.
That's not covered by our current ordinance.
It is,
Oh.
there was, we just figured out that it was actually on city property versus private property. So we had been working with code enforcement under the impression that it was private property. The owner was out of the country for a long time. Anyway, so we were able to actually get like the exact property lines, and we own a little bit of, like, I call it an urban forest out there. It's very much a hike to get to where this person is, and he's actually been there for 6 years. Wow.
Wow.
But it's extremely hid, like. It's
Well hidden.
Yes, extremely well hidden.
But not good.
So, yeah, go ahead.
So while we're bringing this up today,
Yeah.
is we have some of the Zone 0 work going on. Starting in the next couple weeks, both at the Marsh and here at City Hall. And so we need to figure out in terms of plans, moving folks around, just simply for safety. They're gonna be trimming trees, cutting bushes, doing a lot of work. That's not safe for people to sleep right next to. And the other aspect of that is the funding for encampment cleanups is getting just going very quickly, right? We have outside contractors who perform the work. It is expensive. We have to pay prevailing wages for that. So those costs go very quickly. The vast majority of that funding goes just to Anderson Drive cleanups, which you guys know happens once a week. So obviously in budget season, we've been budgeting for cleanups next year. And, to get to a place where the cleanups are happening to the point where the community feels like everything is clean, we would need additional funding for that. Even just with what we have right now, we're using a little bit of the McGuire funding to do some of that cleanup right around the path in Anderson, because there's been ebbs and flows and needed, more cleaning is needed. So that's the encampment update. And so we're here today. We want to get a little guidance in terms of what we're doing as it involves the ordinance and potentially moving people from City Hall either permanently or for a decent amount of time. So that's one part of the conversation. The other conversation is with the governor's announcement with the model camping ordinance, which has a lot of similarities to things that we've put in place here in San Rafael. There's some different things about not letting people camp for more than 3 days and having them shift around. That's another massive resource that like no city has with, unless you have 2 homeless people in your city, like the resources to do that is not feasible in any way. And then the one thing that the governor did point out was to not criminalize sleeping outside when there's no alternative options. And so that's goes into the second part of our agenda here today. So for the Zone Zero work, we're preparing to do a temporary camping prohibition for this work. Starting at City Hall and then moving into the marsh. We feel pretty confident here that the folks around City Hall are gonna move voluntarily. We've been working with them, having outreach and case management go out for the last 2 to 3 weeks. So folks around here, around City Hall are very aware. Where they will go is a different question. So we definitely have some thoughts and plans that we're working with folks there. In the marsh, 2 people are actually, they were on the Mahone Path interest list, so they were staying at Mahone Path. They never went into the sanctioned camp. And so 2 people from there have agreed to move in, and we're at 48, so that will get us to 50 at the site, leaving less folks there. And again, we're doing outreach. There's been a few police and fire incidents out there, so they're also increasing their presence out there to deal with some of the neighborhood concerns and some of the crime that's occurred in that area.
Daniel, before you go on, I want to go back to City Hall and the Zone Zero.
Yeah.
First, because these are like 2 kind of separate things that are related to each other as it relates to risk and timing. So just to be really concrete, I want to make sure I've got this right. The temporary prohibition on camping at City Hall would be the whole block. It would be the parcel. Which would also, anywhere up on here on Mission they couldn't move there, for example. But it would be a city manager. Temporary orders wouldn't go to the council. And it would, sorry, I'm having a hard time with the audio. It wouldn't be permanent. So theoretically, unless the council were to direct that, theoretically, they could then move back in once the work was done. So
Unless we have a revised ordinance at that time.
right, or unless the council directed me to continue.
Yeah,
And
okay.
so the temporary, I mean, this is a question for you, is like, could we do a 6-month if we wanted to?
Well, so Daniel and I looked at the ordinance yesterday and did a little bit into the history, and actually, City Hall is considered a public facility, and you are not camped at a public facility. And so that prohibition has been in place, I think, through, or it began whenever this form of the ordinance began a couple of years ago. It wasn't new when you guys just acted in April. And it hasn't been enforced.
Okay.
Is what it is.
So
Okay.
you're saying it's a public facility?
Yeah, so we can enforce something.
So you don't need to do an additional
Right.
emergency.
There's no amendment needed. I did still recommend to Daniel that we do an administrative order, just because there's a change. And so it's being
For clarity,
communicated, yeah.
But they won't be able to move back because our ordinance already prohibits it.
Okay.
Okay.
I have this maybe somewhat vague recollection that former legal analysis said that it didn't count, but I wholeheartedly trust you. So,
No,
but it might be worth
good assessment.
circling back, because we've had a lot of conversations about whether people can camp on City Hall or not. So my memory could be wrong, but I think it's worth circling on that just to make certain.
I did not dig through city file. We found that
In the ordinance.
in another, well, yeah, so the ordinance was a little bit like whether it was just like the actual building or the parcel.
Yeah.
And so, that's where there was some, I don't know what you looked into, but there was something that there wasn't gonna be enforcement at City Hall. But I can certainly look through the legal files to see, whether there was interpretation rendered.
That would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, 2 questions. So given our current ordinance that's in place to date, are all the hotspots at the maximum number of people because our ordinance regulates time, place, and manner? And so I'm just curious, can there be more than 14 people at Anderson? Like, are these numbers
There can be more people on Anderson, so there, I believe the number, it's 16 with the space. You
That's
can
what I'm
fit
talking about for the
16
space.
people.
City Hall, okay, so that's helpful to know. On Canalways, if that's Fred Grange's property, that's private, and I think I had sent an email, so I'm confused by that.
We own a sliver.
So are they
More
on
than
the
a
slip,
slip.
are
We
they
own-
on the public one or
They're
are
on
they on
the
the private
sliver.
one?
There's, so one person is on private property, or one tent area is on private property, the rest is on city.
Mm.
So we've done a few clearings there in the last couple months. They were on private property and now they've moved.
Okay,
So we're basically the city lot, the city owned parcel is right behind the excess car parking.
mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, because we kept saying canalways, that's the term that we've used for Fred Grange's, so thank you for that. And then my second question is, Newsom's, you can't criminalize unless there's enough spaces in the shelter, but isn't that a disconnect with Grants Pass? I mean, isn't there kind of a disconnect there because Grants Pass with the Supreme Court, we are now able to, if we so choose, to enforce in areas regardless of whether we have shelter or not. So he put that out there, but there's no legal, that's just let me just make something up and write it down and
Yeah.
put it out there. But, right? Because that's
That's
a
correct.
disconnect. to
The
federal
overturn,
law.
yeah, the overturn of grant.
Yes,
Yeah.
the governor can opine as to what he thinks cities should do.
Okay, that's fine.
And he can certainly condition state funding,
Mhm.
No, of course.
but, right, they're like, he doesn't get to overturn the.
I know, so that's what was really, and if it's confusing for all of us that work on this, I can only imagine how it's gonna land for the community, or it will be landing. Okay. Did you have questions?
I don't, I mean, I think that, how long are we looking at the work on City Hall?
At least a week.
Okay. Okay, but it sounds like assuming, it sounds like we could work within our existing ordinance.
I think that would be the goal. That's practical.
Yeah.
But you're recommending a temporary order anyhow.
Yeah,
Just to make sure people are aware.
but because we haven't enforced
Okay.
that in a while, it can at least spell out.
Mhm.
We're doing it for vegetation management, it's already prohibited, that's what we end up concluding.
I think I remember why I think that we were not, we were advised that we couldn't remove campers in front of the library. So that's where we should go back and look at.
Oh, no, that was near the daycare. That's why we removed those, because the daycare across the way, that was the trigger for the library. They're within.
Right, but before that, the first ordinance, we couldn't because there wasn't any
Right.
criteria.
But then we,
So that might be a good thing to
Oh,
look
okay.
at, because that would be same.
Mhm. That makes sense.
can I ask, and again, I want to respect people's privacy who are living on City Hall property, but as I understand it, one of the individuals has severe medical condition and everything else. Is that something that we can get the county? Because we're gonna do our thing, but that situation is so extreme. It's well beyond even putting that individual in the home. Their needs, their medical needs are so huge. So I'm really concerned that we're being asked to do something that's not.
Yeah,
Best for this
and
individual.
that person, is not interested into going into the home. There's a lot of stuff going on there, but yeah, the request is out to the county around that. We have, we've asked Ritter Center to come send nurses out recently. So in terms of like assistance, and then Lynn talks to them
So,
multiple times a
and
week.
we never want to have one-off policies, but in some cases. We
I'm reading
might,
your mind.
do you want to finish my sentence?
Go ahead.
No, and I just went to the low hanging fruit, which was the funding of a hotel room until they get stable. I mean, and we're really careful about that, but
Yeah.
it just does not sit well with me in terms of our values.
And it's gonna
personally.
create more problems. I mean, if that individual's out and we have to keep calling. 911.
1,000,000%. We have, plan A, B, and C
Okay.
right now, for folks. Not everything goes as planned, and
Of
so if
course.
we need plan D, we'll work.
Mhm.
on it.
Okay.
We honestly, we've explored pretty much every possible avenue that's available, like within the city, within this county and elsewhere. Connect with the family, like everything.
Has the individual refused to go into a hotel previously?
Yeah, they actually have, more financial wherewithal and ability than,
Mhm.
the majority of people out there.
And you have reached out to Gary at the county about trying to get county support for intervention
Yeah,
and
and
medical.
there's a lot of, distrust within the public health
Yeah.
and social service network.
I'm sorry.
Really
keep asking
tragic.
this. I know, because I know you've thought about this, and it's more not because you haven't thought about it, but just to satisfy our own curiosity.
Yeah.
So Homeward Bound has that medical respite beds. Maybe they're better at talking to
They
the
get-
individual.
Those beds get filled through the hospital system.
Well, that person should be in the hospital, so.
I mean, perhaps there's a, again, in the spirit of trying to keep this person safe.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's a conservatorship element that could happen through the courts.
So just from my observation, conserving someone or even care court, they're not close to that level. It's extremely difficult to get someone conserved.
Yeah,
Um,
I know that for sure.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah,
Okay.
so let's,
Well, we know you guys are.
let's
Yeah.
talk
Just
about,
know that you have the support at the council to
Absolutely.
think outside the box for that individual, because just the medical needs are so.
Mhm.
so just to kind of wrap up this
Yeah.
enforcement part of the conversation, we felt like it was important to let the subcommittee know. Because anytime we're doing this, right, we know there's some legal risk in doing it, so it's, even if it's 6 or 7 people and it's temporary. There's a displacement happening and we feel confident it's the right thing to do for lots of good reasons, but we just want to make sure that you're comfortable with that approach and we're gonna proceed, because it's next week, so.
Yeah.
We would issue the the temporary prohibition
by Friday.
on Friday, and conversations have already happened, we'd provide formal notice. And I think
We're
our,
gonna put some A-frames up right outside.
for like work, construction, kind of, and our requirement is 48 hours, but we're gonna give them more.
Yeah.
Formal time, like we could notice them on Friday as well.
Either that is the plan.
Okay, awesome, great.
Yeah, I think the messaging, we just need to be careful on this was planned. And we were gonna be doing this because I know Quinn had talked about doing this work around
It was
City
part
Hall.
of the MWPA work.
Right,
plan.
it's part of the whole plan, and so I just wanna make sure that it's not tied with. The community may put the connection that it's tied to the Newsom communication.
Mhm.
Yeah, this has been in the works
I know,
much longer
It's just
than.
the timing of it is gonna
Yeah,
look like we are
yeah.
enacting, and why aren't we doing it on Anderson? Why aren't we doing it here? Why aren't we
Yeah.
doing it? So,
Yeah.
I don't know.
No matter what we do.
I know,
You're right,
I
the
know.
messaging, I think, but to your point, I think, however we want to respond to that, I think clarifying how long this has been a plan, and it is not a signal that we are
and why aren't we
doing
doing
anything
it?
else.
And the question is, why are we not doing it other places?
Because Anderson, there's no zone zero work to do, and it's not
Right.
our property, so yeah.
This is
so
being
we can-
driven by specifically this action.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, great.
Was there anything else, Daniel, or Andrea, on the enforcement or ordinance side that you guys wanted to cover? That's pretty much it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the admin order, one of the reasons why I advise on the admin order is so that we can explain our actions.
Right.
Otherwise, it just happens.
No, I
Yeah.
agree.
Mhm.
I think that's good. Yeah, so it will articulate all of that.
Yeah. Great.
Daniel, just quickly on the canalways, I know you mentioned there's zone zero work happening there as well.
Yeah,
And when is that planned for?
the same time as City Hall, we're doing it all at the same time. There's,
So we would be doing a temporary ban there as well?
Yeah.
At the same time. So 13 people in total, looks like.
Say California Park's open.
Okay.
California Park.
So we'll move on to B. So. Following the meetings with the county that transpired this week. I want to make a couple of recommendations to the subcommittee, but also just a heads up for the closed session we're planning for Monday night for the whole council. So I would ask for Andrea to advise on this, but I would suggest that this is not as much of a back and forth conversation as Q&A
Mhm.
instead of opining on
Mhm.
like a yes or no to any of these kind of potential counter terms.
Mhm.
Does that work?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think when we respond to the county formally in writing to their counter to our proposal, that in a very simple, straightforward form, that we should develop what problem are we trying to solve? So we have it very, very crystal clear and in simple, concise, plain language as possible. So that from a messaging standpoint and just also kind of trying to confirm and validate, since that's been a point of confusion, I think it's really important that we nail that. So it's like elevator
Mhm.
talk sort of
Mhm.
approach. So we'll do that. Think I will be making a recommendation to the council that in any case that we would want to purchase the property and hold it for the purposes of entitling an affordable housing project on that site.
Mhm.
So whether or not any other homeless program that's a temporary program would be feasible is from a timing perspective, there's more work to be done on that feasibility and funding opportunities. So I think just given the location, it being on our housing element, a huge opportunity to try to get that lower, like 40% AMI sort of housing
Mhm.
out there and meeting our arena numbers, that I would make that recommendation. So because we'll put a memo together for closed
Mhm.
session that includes kind of these deal points so the other council members can
Mhm.
consider that before we go in. I think one of the important components of whatever program that would happen on that site is the concept of a closed or an open system, because I think that is a really important, there's a really important distinction to be made about, as it relates to going back to what problem we're trying to solve. And so I will, draft a response that ties the city's proposal to the problems we're trying to solve and how a completely closed system doesn't solve some of the problems that we're trying to solve for.
Mhm.
And as it relates to increasing capacity of shelter beds, et cetera. So in my mind, there's kind of a hybrid where it's capped. So it's not, it will only serve X amount of people, but it will only serve X amount of people on top of that. So we're not necessarily in a waiting list kind of situation, but as a unit of shelter becomes available because somebody gets housed, that we would want to take in another individual, and for all the reasons why we think interim shelter is a good idea. And then if the risk is that later down the road, whenever at the point, because this is a temporary solution, it needs to close, then we would have to, the challenge of, the goal of the program is to be able to house as many people in that period of time, so we don't have a whole bunch of people there at the end of the programming. But what I mean by capped is it could be a point in time where, okay, now we're not going to take any more. And through attrition, we're going to try to work our way down, but not limiting to the current number of however many people are on Mahoney Path right now. So I'll include that. The other thing that we will work on at the staff level is other creative ideas around ways that we might find solutions to the funding gap that we have with what the ongoing commitment would be for the city's general fund to pick up, which is, right now we have a $200,000 in encampment cost cleanup. And so want to think about ways that maybe there's other offsets that could help mitigate for the financial risk that we would be taking. Let's see. I think that may be all there is on that.
Can you add communication as part of that letter? In the discussion, when we go to closed, like
Communication around like the
coordination of,
joint
yes,
communication. Yep. I think that's a great idea. In other words, anything that wherever this goes, that the city and county would issue some joint communication around it.
and I think because we've all been working on this so much in the
Mhm.
weeds on it, but I think as we bring others into the conversation, it's important to talk about funding current and then funding future. And putting out some type of timeline of today versus just again to bring people up on, I'm just thinking how we're gonna bring everybody up to speed on this topic.
Any other questions or comments or things you want me to take into consideration as we take our next steps? Okay. Anything else on your end? Okay. Got 10 more minutes to
Yeah.
work on your speech.
Oh my God.
The meeting, yeah,
Wait, do we have
So-
any requests for future meeting agenda items?
that would be mainly for you to, and this is both housing and homelessness.
Yeah.
So if there's anything on the horizon that you feel like either there's some time sensitivity to, or that you want to make sure staff is working toward.
So I'm gonna ask this without messing up our, so we already had a meeting around the whole NOFA and then staff provided a memo. So is the next step on that going to council with the NOFA as presented? Because we already talked
In that
about it.
memo,
Yes,
correct,
okay, so that's not coming back to this committee, okay.
unless you tell me otherwise.
So,
It doesn't need to come back to the committee, but there might be conversation.
Sure.
yeah, of course, okay. Great, any public comment? Not seeing anyone in the room because we're the only people in the room.
Oh, I'm sorry, was there anything else?
Oh.
For you or you, Rachel, on future agenda items that you wanted to? Nothing, okay.
Thank you.
Anything from staff?
Okay. Public comment, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.